It was a bright afternoon, the kind where the sun painted everything golden, and children's laughter filled the streets. The city was alive, people moving in all directions, cars honking softly and vendors calling out their daily sales. Among this ordinary chaos, a small child walked slowly along the sidewalk, backpack bouncing lightly with each step. The child's small hands clutched the straps tightly, eyes wandering from the bright signs above the shops to the people walking past. Everything seemed normal, routine even. Like any other day, the child's pace was steady, not hurried. But there was a slight nervousness in the way the shoulders tensed whenever a stranger passed too close. It wasn't unusual. The city streets could be unpredictable. Children often learned quickly to notice the small changes in the environment, the sudden shout, a raised voice, or a group of people moving unusually fast. Today, the child was especially alert, though unaware that something unexpected was about to unfold. As the child continued walking, a sudden noise sliced through the afternoon calm. A loud shout came from a nearby alley, and a few people turned their heads in surprise. The child paused, instinctively stepping closer to the edge of the sidewalk. Curiosity and fear mixed together, a strange combination that made the stomach twist. Before long, a small group of adults emerged, shouting and struggling. Two of them seemed to be in a conflict, one trying to snatch something from the other, while a crowd began forming slowly around them, the air filled with the sounds of anger, panic, and confusion. The child's heart began to race. Tiny hands trembled slightly, the backpack feeling heavier with every heartbeat. Tears pricked the eyes, blurring the vision just enough to make the surroundings feel like a spinning whirl of colors and movement. The people around were loud, shouting, pushing, and moving fast, but to the child, it all felt chaotic and dangerous. The instinct to run, to find safety, kicked in almost immediately. The child darted forward, trying to avoid the crowd, but the feet stumbled on the uneven pavement. A few people moved aside quickly, glaring or muttering under their breath, but none reached out to stop the commotion. The child's small voice joined the chaos, a frightened cry that was quickly drowned by the shouting around. Panic was taking over and the need for safety became urgent. Where could the child go? The child didn't know anyone nearby, had no familiar faces in sight. Just the blur of strangers and noise. And then, across the crowded street, the child noticed someone, a figure standing calmly, seemingly untouched by the surrounding turmoil. Unlike the others who were shouting or running, this person seemed composed, confident, and completely aware of what was happening. There was something in the way they stood, the way their eyes scanned the scene with quiet authority. The child didn't understand exactly why, but something about that figure felt safe. It was almost magnetic, pulling the frightened child toward it without a word. The decision was made in a heartbeat. Tears streamed freely now, cheeks flushed with fear, but the child ran. Small feet pounded the pavement, backpack bouncing harder than ever while sobs escaped uncontrollably. The crowd seemed to part slightly as if sensing the urgency, though no one actually helped. People were still caught up in their own confusion. The child's focus was singular. Reach that safe figure across the street. Cars honked as the child ran. But the driver slowed, wary of the small figure darting across the road. Some pedestrians shouted warnings, but their voices barely reached the child's ears, overwhelmed by fear and adrenaline. Each step felt heavy yet urgent, each breath short and uneven. The world had narrowed down to one goal: safety. Finally, the child reached the figure, almost collapsing into their legs. The stranger bent down slightly, arms opening instinctively, catching the child securely. There was no hesitation, no second thought. The small, trembling body was enveloped in calm, steady hands that radiated warmth and protection. The child's cries mingled with relief, a strange mix of terror and comfort. For the first time since the noise began, there was a sense of safety, though still fragile and uncertain. The stranger knelt down further, looking directly at the child. There was no rush, no scolding, just gentle words, soft and soothing. The child's sobs continued, but gradually slowed, the arms of the stranger providing an invisible shield from the danger that still lingered nearby. The crowd was still present, the shouting still audible, but it no longer felt like a direct threat. In that small cocoon of safety, the child felt like the world had shrunk down to just two people, themselves and the stranger. The child looked up through tear-filled eyes. The stranger's face was calm, kind, yet commanding in a way that immediately inspired trust. There was no hurry, no visible fear, only the assurance that, in this moment, nothing bad would happen to the child. The arms tightened slightly, a comforting embrace, but not restrictive. And the words continued, gentle but firm. "It's okay. You're safe now." Some of the people in the crowd began to notice the child clinging to the stranger. A few whispers passed among the onlookers, murmurs of curiosity and awe. Who was this person? Why were they so calm? But the child didn't care about any of that. All that mattered was the safety they now felt in the arms of this unexpected protector. Minutes seemed to stretch, the chaos continuing around them. But inside that small protective bubble, the child could breathe. The stranger kept talking softly, asking questions in a careful, patient manner, letting the child respond in their own time. The world was still loud, the street still dangerous, but here and now, nothing could touch the child. This moment, small and fragile as it was, marked the beginning of something extraordinary. The child's sobs began to subside further, replaced by quiet sniffles and shaky breaths. A small hand clutched the stranger's jacket, reluctant to let go. Sensing that letting go might return the child to the danger they had narrowly escaped, the stranger noticed this, gently patting the child's shoulder. A silent promise of protection. For a brief moment, the child thought about what could have happened if they hadn't run. The mind flickered with fear, imagining the crowd, the attackers, and the danger. But each time the thought came, the reassuring presence of the stranger pushed it away. Here, in these arms, the world made sense again. Here, the child could just be a child, crying, scared, and yet safe. And so, on that busy city street, amid the chaos and confusion, a small child found an unexpected haven. The crowd moved on, the noise continued, but the connection between the child and the stranger remained unbroken. It was a moment of human kindness, of instinctive protection, of courage that didn't seek recognition. The child didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything, marking the beginning of a story that no one could have predicted. As the minutes passed, the stranger kept the child close, scanning the surroundings carefully. The attackers were gone now, pushed back by the crowd or perhaps distracted, but the stranger didn't let their guard down. Every movement was deliberate, ensuring that the child remained untouched, safe from any lingering danger. And though the child was exhausted, still trembling from the shock, a small flicker of trust had begun to grow. The child realized in some deep, unspoken way that they were not alone anymore. There was someone who would stand between them and the world's dangers. Someone who could be trusted completely. The city continued to move around them, indifferent to the small drama that had unfolded on its streets. But for the child, nothing would ever feel the same again. In those few minutes of terror and relief, a bond had formed, one built not on words or promises, but on action and instinct. The stranger had acted without hesitation, without thought for recognition, and in doing so had given the child something far more valuable than safety: hope. The child sniffled one last time, finally managing a small nod, signaling that they were starting to feel secure. The stranger smiled faintly, acknowledging the gesture, and continued to speak softly, letting the child absorb the calm, letting the fear slowly melt away. It was a quiet, human moment amidst the noise and chaos, a moment that would be remembered long after the day ended. And so, the child clung to the stranger, the tears slowly drying. And the first chapter of a life-changing encounter came to a quiet, tender pause. The world outside was still loud and unpredictable. But for now, in this small, human-centric story of fear, courage, and unexpected protection, the child had found a safe place to simply exist, to breathe, and to begin healing from the shock of the attack. The stranger held the child firmly, keeping a calm but alert expression. Around them, the city continued in its usual rhythm, unaware of the tiny drama that had unfolded. The sounds of car engines, distant chatter, and the occasional horn filled the air, but within the small space between the child and the stranger, Everything felt quiet, almost suspended. The child's breaths were still uneven, small hiccups interrupting the attempts to calm down. But the warmth of the stranger's arms offered a sense of security that had been absent moments ago. The stranger shifted slightly, ensuring that the child's back was protected while gently moving them toward a safer corner of the street. It was a subtle motion, almost instinctive, designed to keep the child out of sight of any potential threats. The stranger's eyes scanned the surroundings constantly, observing every movement of people, every flicker of activity that could pose danger. Though calm, there was an alertness, a quiet intensity that suggested experience with unexpected situations. The child noticed this and clung tighter, sensing that they were truly in safe hands. Once they were at a distance from the commotion, the stranger knelt down to the child's level. The gesture wasn't dramatic, just careful and deliberate, allowing the child to feel seen and understood. "It's okay," the stranger whispered, voice soft and steady. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you here." The child sniffled, unsure how to respond, but the words calm and steady seeped into their mind like a gentle promise. There was no rush, no panic, just a presence that seemed to shield the child from fear itself. The child's small hands rested against the stranger's chest, trembling slightly. The backpack, heavy and awkward, pressed uncomfortably. But the stranger adjusted it without a word, making sure the child didn't feel burdened by it. The city's noise continued around them, but it no longer felt threatening. Each sound, each movement of passing people, was just a part of the background, nothing to worry about. The child began to notice the warmth of the stranger's presence more than the chaos outside. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" The stranger asked gently, careful not to push too hard. The child hesitated, unsure if words could capture the fear that had gripped them moments before. Slowly, in small, halting phrases, the child recounted the sudden attack. The crowd, the shouting, and the overwhelming panic. Tears still lingered, but there was a slight relief in speaking aloud, a release that made the world feel a bit less threatening. The stranger listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, offering quiet encouragement. The child noticed the stranger's hands were strong but gentle, capable of action if needed, yet soft enough to comfort. It was a strange mix of strength and kindness, something the child instinctively recognized as safe. There was no judgment, no condescension, just an understanding presence that seemed to absorb the fear without diminishing it. The words from the child came slowly at first, but gradually they found their rhythm, each sentence breaking through the lingering panic. Around them, a few pedestrians glanced curiously, some whispering among themselves about the calm stranger with the frightened child in their arms. But the stranger paid no attention to the observers, fully focused on the child's needs. Every movement, every gesture was directed at maintaining safety and comfort. The child felt a strange mix of relief and awe. They didn't know why this stranger had appeared at just the right moment, but in their heart, a seed of trust began to grow. Minutes passed like this, small and quiet, though the world continued in its loud, chaotic rhythm around them. The stranger gently guided the child to a nearby bench, careful to keep them out of the main path of pedestrians and traffic. Once seated, the child's body began to relax slightly, though small tremors of fear remained. The stranger sat nearby, close enough to maintain contact, but not overwhelming. It was a delicate balance of presence and respect for the child's space, one that the child instinctively understood. The stranger spoke softly, asking simple questions, not about anything intrusive, but about the child's day, their school, what they liked, even what they feared. The child responded cautiously at first, unsure if words could truly convey trust, but the calm, patient tone encouraged them to speak. Each answer, small as it was met with nods, gentle smiles, and sometimes laughter, light and comforting. The child began to feel something they hadn't felt in a long time: normalcy. A sense that the world wasn't entirely frightening. Time passed slowly. The stranger's presence was steady, unyielding in its calmness. The child began to notice details, the way the stranger's eyes carefully watched the surroundings without showing alarm, the subtle way they adjusted the jacket over the child's shoulders to make them comfortable. It was a reassurance that went beyond words, a silent promise that safety was not temporary, that the moment was secure. Eventually, the stranger reached into a pocket and offered a small tissue to the child, who accepted it with tentative hands. There was no hurry, no expectation, just a simple act of care. The child wiped away the last traces of tears, feeling slightly more in control of their emotions. The presence of the stranger had made the impossible feel manageable. Where minutes ago terror had ruled, a quiet sense of calm began to settle as they sat together. The stranger spoke about simple things, places the child might like to visit. Stories about the city that were safe and comforting. Small anecdotes that drew smiles and short laughter. The child responded in kind, the laughter shaky but genuine. A sound that seemed almost foreign after the intense fear earlier. The world outside was still noisy, still unpredictable, but in this moment, everything felt contained and safe. Gradually, the stranger shifted focus to the practical. They asked if the child had anyone to call, if there was a parent or guardian nearby. The child shook their head, voice small, admitting that they had wandered from home and didn't know where to find help. The stranger nodded, understanding without judgment, and spoke of a plan to ensure the child would be safely reunited with someone responsible. There was no fear, no panic, just a steady approach to solving the problem. The child listened, absorbing the words, feeling the tension ease further. They began to mimic the stranger's calmness unconsciously, taking deeper breaths, sitting a little taller, allowing the warmth of protection to sink in. The stranger occasionally reached out, a hand on the shoulder, a gentle squeeze, reinforcing the unspoken assurance that the child was safe. Each small gesture built a foundation of trust, solidifying the bond formed in the moments of crisis. People continued to pass by, some pausing to glance at the unusual sight, a small child sitting calmly with a composed stranger. Some whispered to each other, speculating about the relationship, while others walked on, indifferent. But none of this mattered to the child. All that mattered was the sense of security, the calm authority, and the unwavering presence of someone who had chosen to step in when fear threatened to take over. The stranger remained vigilant, eyes scanning the surroundings while also paying attention to the child's responses. There were subtle movements, adjusting the seating, straightening the child's jacket, lightly holding their hands to steady them. These acts, small and human, reinforced the idea that care could be both gentle and firm. The child began to relax further, realizing that the fear that had gripped them earlier was slowly being replaced by a growing confidence that everything would be okay. As the minutes stretched, the child's sobs ceased entirely. The gentle words of reassurance, the patient questions, and the small acts of care created a cocoon in which the child could begin to breathe again. The stranger's presence was not just protective, but also nurturing, providing the child with something profoundly human: attention, empathy, and a sense of being seen and understood. The stranger spoke about waiting safely until someone could come for the child, explaining in simple terms that help would arrive soon. The child listened, eyes wide but no longer filled with panic. The trembling had slowed, replaced by a cautious sense of curiosity about the stranger who had stepped into their life at the precise moment of danger. Trust was growing, fragile but unmistakable, and the child felt a small spark of hope flicker within their chest. The street remained busy, but the child no longer felt lost among the crowd. They were anchored by the stranger's calm presence, aware that they were no longer alone in the face of danger. The bond formed was subtle, human, and powerful, built entirely on protection, patience, and empathy. The child began to understand that, in the midst of fear, a single act of kindness and courage could change everything. Time seemed to flow differently, measured not by the passing cars or moving pedestrians, but by the child's slowly returning confidence. The stranger's patient demeanor and gentle words created a rhythm that the child could follow, a pattern of safety and reassurance. Each moment reinforced the idea that they were no longer at the mercy of fear, that someone was looking out for them. The stranger encouraged the child to take deep breaths, to relax their small tense shoulders, and to slowly regain control over their emotions. The child followed the instructions carefully, feeling the panic gradually dissolve, replaced by a quiet sense of safety. It was an extraordinary transformation, subtle yet profound. A testament to the power of human connection and protective instinct. By the time the stranger finally stood up, preparing to guide the child toward the next step of ensuring they would be safely reunited with a caregiver, the child was already sitting more confidently. The trembling had nearly stopped, the tears were gone, and the small, shaky voice had regained enough courage to speak in sentences. The child looked up at the stranger with a mix of gratitude, awe, and a dawning realization that the world could hold moments of kindness even amid chaos. And so, in the midst of the bustling city, a quiet yet powerful bond had been formed. The child, once terrified and alone, now felt a growing sense of trust. The city continued to move around them, busy and loud as always, but the child and the stranger seemed to exist in a small world of their own. The moment of danger was behind them, yet the air still held a tension that made the child cling a little closer. The stranger noticed and gave a reassuring squeeze to the small shoulder, a simple gesture that said without words, "You are safe, and I will not let anything harm you." After a moment, the stranger spoke gently, suggesting they move to a safer place away from the crowded streets. The child nodded, following closely, their hand still held in the stranger's large, steady one. The world outside still rushed by, cars honking, people talking, the city alive with motion, but each step with the stranger felt secure. They passed small shops and quiet corners, avoiding busy intersections and ensuring the child's path was calm and protected. As they walked, the stranger occasionally glanced down at the child, offering soft words of encouragement. "You did really well," they said quietly. "Running to safety was the right thing to do?" The child looked up, eyes wide, unsure if praise was appropriate, but the warmth in the words was undeniable. For the first time since the attack, the child felt a small spark of pride, a feeling that they had acted with courage even when fear had threatened to take over. They reached a quiet side street, less traveled by pedestrians and vehicles. The stranger led the child to a small cafe with large windows, sitting them down at a corner table. The child still clutched the backpack tightly, but there was a slight relaxation in their posture. The stranger sat across, maintaining eye contact, but giving enough space for the child to feel in control. The world outside could wait. This moment was about care, comfort, and rebuilding trust. The stranger asked the child if they wanted something to drink, a simple gesture of normalcy. The child nodded slowly, words still hesitant but forming. A cup of warm water was brought, and the child sipped carefully, feeling the warmth spread through their small body. It was a mundane action, but to the child it carried a strange comfort, a reminder that life could continue even after frightening events. As the child drank, the stranger began to speak softly, telling small stories about the city, about places to explore safely, and little adventures that were interesting yet not dangerous. The child listened, initially quietly, then with growing curiosity. Laughter escaped in small bursts, shaky but genuine. The stranger smiled, not interrupting, letting the child respond at their own pace. Understanding that this moment was about rebuilding trust, not rushing through words. Time passed slowly. The stranger asked gentle questions about school, favorite subjects, and hobbies. The child responded with increasing confidence, words flowing more freely as the initial fear faded. Each response was met with nods, soft affirmations, and sometimes a light laugh. The conversation was simple, natural, and entirely human, centered around connection and empathy. The child began to feel understood, not just protected, and the world seemed a little less intimidating. The stranger noticed the child's small hand occasionally reaching to adjust the backpack, a subtle sign of lingering anxiety. Without a word, the stranger leaned closer, adjusting the straps and patting the child's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it carried a powerful message. "You are safe, and I am here to help." The child's trembling eased further, each moment of attention reinforcing the sense of protection and care. The cafe was quiet enough for them to speak softly, yet the world outside continued its rhythm. Passersby glanced in, curious at the calm stranger with the child, but the attention was irrelevant. The child's focus was entirely on the stranger, the one who had appeared at the perfect moment, shielding them from danger. Trust, once fragile, was beginning to grow into something solid and human. After some time, the stranger leaned back slightly, still observing the child carefully. "Do you want to tell me more about your day?" they asked gently. The child hesitated but began to recount small moments, from school lessons to playground games. There was no judgment, no rush, only patient listening and encouraging nods. The child's words became more animated, small smiles appearing. The tension in their body slowly dissolving, the stranger continued to guide the child through the calming process. Deep breaths were suggested, small stretches to release tension, and simple movements that gave the child a sense of control over their body and emotions. Each instruction was accompanied by encouragement, reinforcing the idea that they could handle fear and regain composure. The child began to follow along willingly, sense of agency returning as the moments of terror became more distant. Outside, the city remained a bustling maze of motion, but inside this small corner, a bond had formed. The stranger was no longer just a protector in a crisis. They had become a source of guidance, comfort, and understanding. The child noticed details, the calm steadiness of their movements, the gentle tone of their voice, the way they anticipated needs without being intrusive. It was a presence that combined care and vigilance seamlessly. At one point, the child's gaze drifted out the window, observing the busy street, people moving in all directions, some stopping to look at the cafe. The stranger followed the child's line of sight and softly suggested that the child continue sitting quietly until someone responsible could be contacted. The child nodded, appreciating the continued guidance and feeling a growing sense of security. For the first time since the attack, the child allowed themselves to relax fully, leaning slightly back in the chair, letting the stranger's presence anchor them. The stranger spoke about simple, safe routines, places to go, things to notice, and how to avoid danger in the future. The child absorbed the advice with interest, asking questions and even offering small suggestions based on their own experiences. It was a human conversation grounded in empathy, understanding, and shared attention. The child's laughter returned, in small bursts, a sound that had been absent since the initial panic. The world felt lighter, more navigable, and less threatening. As the minutes continued, the stranger prepared to contact someone who could ensure the child's long-term safety. They explained in simple terms what would happen next, giving the child a sense of control over the process. The child listened carefully, asking questions, and the stranger answered patiently, reinforcing trust and making the child feel involved in decisions that affected them. It was a delicate balance of guidance and respect, one that allowed the child to regain confidence without fear. The bond between the child and the stranger deepened further. The child began to speak more openly, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been bottled up since the attack. The stranger responded with empathy, validating the child's emotions and helping them process the fear and confusion. There was no rush, no judgment, only consistent, patient attention that made the child feel seen, heard, and protected. Throughout this time, the stranger remained alert, observing the cafe, the street outside, and any potential sources of concern. Yet the vigilance was quiet, unassuming, allowing the child to focus on healing rather than danger. It was a remarkable balance, combining calm protection with attentive care. And the child responded to it instinctively, trusting the presence completely. Eventually, the stranger suggested a small walk, a way to stretch and continue processing the emotions of the afternoon. The child agreed, feeling safe enough to step outside again, hand in hand with the stranger. The city was still bustling, but the child now moved with caution and confidence, guided by the steady presence of the stranger. Each step reinforced the lesson that danger could be faced, that fear could be managed, that someone could be trusted implicitly. As they walked, the stranger spoke of small joys, simple pleasures, and safe ways to explore the world. The child listened eagerly, asking questions, engaging in the conversation, and even offering their own observations. It was a human connection built on empathy, experience, and instinctive care. The fear that had dominated the afternoon was replaced by a growing sense of wonder, curiosity, hope. The stranger guided the child to a quieter street away from the main flow of traffic and continued to ensure safety at every step. Each movement, each word, reinforced the idea that the child was no longer alone, that protection and understanding could exist even in the midst of a chaotic world. The child began to relax fully, trusting the stranger to guide them, feeling a sense of security that was both rare and profound. Minutes turned into longer moments of calm, each one building trust and resilience in the child. The stranger's presence was steady, gentle, and unwavering, allowing the child to process the fear, regain confidence, and prepare for the next step, reuniting with someone responsible for their care. The city continued around them, unaware of the quiet, human-centric story unfolding within its streets, but for the child, the world felt fundamentally safer. By the time the stranger prepared to contact a responsible adult, the child was calm, composed, and engaged in conversation. The sobs were long gone, replaced by laughter, questions, and thoughtful reflections. The transformation from fear to trust, from panic to confidence, was remarkable, a testament to the power of human kindness, patience, and protection. The child felt ready for the next step, guided by the steady, empathetic presence that had appeared at the perfect moment in their life. And so, as the stranger made the necessary arrangements to ensure the child's continued safety, the bond between them remained unbroken. The child, once trembling and fearful, now felt secure, understood, and valued. The city outside continued its endless rhythm, but within this small world, a life-changing connection had been formed. The child's trust had been earned, their fear addressed, and their hope restored. What had begun as a moment of terror was now evolving into a story of resilience, human care, and the quiet power of one person's courage to change the life of another. The child and the stranger walked slowly along the quieter street, away from the noise and chaos that had marked the afternoon. The sunlight was softer here, filtered through tall trees lining the sidewalk, creating dappled patterns on the pavement. The child still clutched the stranger's hand, finding comfort in the steady warmth and strength that the presence offered. There was no hurry, no rush to move forward, only a gentle, deliberate pace that allowed the child to regain full control of their thoughts and emotions. As they moved, the stranger began to speak softly, asking the child about small everyday things. "What do you like to do after school?" they asked. The child hesitated at first, unsure if words could truly convey feelings, but slowly began to speak. The answers were short at first, then longer, filled with small details about favorite games, colors, and simple routines. The stranger listened attentively, nodding, occasionally smiling, allowing the child to feel heard and understood. The act of listening, patient and uninterrupted, provided a comfort far deeper than words alone could offer. The conversation shifted naturally from light topics to the afternoon's events, though the stranger approached it gently, without forcing the child to relive the fear. The child spoke about the shouting, the crowd, and the sudden panic, their words shaky at first but growing steadier with each sentence. The stranger nodded, never interrupting, offering only small affirmations and reassurances. Each nod, each calm word, reinforced the feeling that the child's emotions were valid and understandable. There was no judgment, only empathy and understanding. They reached a small park, tucked between buildings, where the noise of traffic softened to distant hums. The stranger guided the child to a bench under a tree, motioning for them to sit while keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The child complied, feeling safe in the familiar act of sitting, their small body relaxing slightly. The stranger remained nearby, giving space but maintaining a protective presence, a silent promise that they would not be left alone. After a few minutes, The stranger asked gently if the child wanted to share anything more about their life. The child's initial hesitation gave way to careful words, speaking about family, school, and friends. Some of the stories were joyful, others tinged with worry. But the stranger listened patiently, providing encouragement and understanding with every response. The child's eyes, once filled with fear, now held curiosity and a budding sense of trust. The stranger's attention to the child's small gestures did not go unnoticed. When the child fidgeted with the backpack, the stranger adjusted it gently, a simple act that conveyed care and attentiveness. When the child's fingers twisted nervously, the stranger offered a reassuring squeeze of the hand, never intrusive, always considerate. Each gesture was deliberate, human, and filled with quiet compassion. The child began to internalize this safety, feeling that they could breathe freely without the constant shadow of fear. Time passed. Unhurried, as they spoke, laughed softly, and shared quiet moments of calm. The stranger encouraged the child to look around, notice the small things, the flowers along the edge of the park, the sound of birds, the warmth of sunlight on the skin. These simple observations acted as grounding tools, allowing the child to reconnect with the world without fear. Slowly, the tension in the small body eased, replaced by a sense of curiosity and wonder. After a while, the stranger gently suggested that they could contact someone responsible for the child, explaining that they wanted to ensure the child's safety beyond the immediate moment. The child nodded, still clinging to the hand, but feeling confident enough to trust the plan. The stranger spoke in simple, clear words, outlining the steps and making the child feel involved. This approach gave the child a sense of agency, a feeling that decisions were being made with their input, not just for them. While waiting for confirmation, the stranger suggested a short walk around the park to stretch legs and continue building confidence. The child agreed, holding tightly to the hand, but moving with more assurance than before. Each step was guided, cautious, and deliberate, reinforcing the sense of safety and care. The world outside was no longer a source of panic, but a place to observe, learn, and interact under watchful protection as they walked. The stranger told small stories about the city, interesting but safe places to explore, and simple lessons about paying attention and staying aware. The child listened attentively, occasionally asking questions, and even sharing their own small observations. The interaction was deeply human, built on empathy, patience, and the recognition of the child's intelligence and feelings. The child's laughter began to return more freely, unforced and light, filling the spaces of previous fear with a sense of joy. During the walk, they encountered a few other children playing at a distance. The stranger encouraged the child to watch safely, pointing out how children interacted and moved in harmony, drawing lessons about balance, caution, and friendship. The child observed carefully, absorbing not only the behavior of others but also the calm, steady guidance of the stranger. The presence of someone trustworthy allowed the child to engage with the world from a place of safety rather than fear. The stranger continued to reinforce lessons about safety and self-awareness in a gentle, non-intrusive manner. The child began to repeat these observations, showing growing confidence and understanding. Each repetition was met with quiet praise, further building trust and self-esteem. The child felt seen, acknowledged, and understood. A stark contrast to the chaos of the earlier afternoon, minutes turned into an hour, and the child's energy began to return fully. The stranger suggested small exercises to release tension, like stretching arms and legs, walking slowly, and noticing breathing. These exercises were accompanied by explanations, helping the child understand how their body and mind could work together to manage fear. The child followed diligently, experiencing the power of small, deliberate actions to regain control and feel secure. After the exercises, the stranger guided the child back to the bench, where they sat together quietly, enjoying the calm atmosphere. The child's breathing was steady, the small tremors long gone, replaced by a feeling of relaxation and trust. The stranger continued to speak gently, weaving stories and observations into the quiet moments, reinforcing a sense of normalcy and stability. The child began to mirror the calm, taking slow breaths, observing surroundings, and noticing small details with curiosity rather than fear. Finally, the stranger spoke about the next step, ensuring that the child would be safely reunited with someone responsible. The child listened carefully, understanding the plan and expressing readiness. The stranger reassured the child, emphasizing that safety would continue even after the immediate danger was gone. The words were simple but powerful, reinforcing the trust and bond that had grown through hours of calm, attentive guidance throughout the time together. The stranger had maintained a careful balance of vigilance, patience, and empathy. The child had experienced the full range of human support protection from immediate danger. Gentle guidance, empathetic listening, encouragement, and the restoration of confidence and trust. Each action had been deliberate, human, and effective, creating a foundation for resilience and emotional growth, the child realized. Slowly and quietly, that the stranger's presence was more than physical protection. It was an emotional anchor, a reminder that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, someone could be trusted to care, guide, and protect. This realization brought a deep sense of relief and gratitude, emotions that the child had not allowed themselves to feel fully in the chaos of the attack. The stranger's careful attention to every small detail, the tone of voice, the gentle gestures, the patient listening. The consistent calm transformed a moment of fear into an experience of trust in human connection. The child's confidence continued to grow, and by the end of the afternoon, they were able to speak openly, laugh genuinely, and even make small decisions with guidance. The bond formed was profound, a rare combination of instinctive protection and human empathy that would leave a lasting impression. As they prepared to meet someone responsible for the child, the stranger ensured that the transition would be smooth, explaining what would happen next and reinforcing that the child's safety remained the priority. The child listened attentively, no longer fearful, but curious and engaged, understanding that the protection and care extended beyond this immediate encounter. The sense of security and trust was now firmly established, a testament to the stranger's deliberate and human approach to guiding a frightened child. And so, in the quiet corners of the city, far from the noise and fear that had dominated earlier, a small child found safety, understanding, and hope. The stranger's presence had done more than prevent immediate harm. It had restored trust, taught resilience, and created a bond that would influence the child's perception of the world for years to come. The afternoon's events, though terrifying at first, had been transformed into a story of human care, connection, and the quiet but extraordinary power of one person's kindness and attention. The afternoon sunlight began to soften further, casting long shadows across the quiet streets as the child and the stranger walked toward a safe place where someone responsible would meet them. The child's small hand remained firmly in the stranger's, each step filled with a quiet confidence that had been absent earlier. The world felt less threatening now, calmer, and the child's trust in the stranger had grown into a deep sense of security. The stranger remained vigilant, scanning the surroundings carefully, ensuring that no unexpected danger appeared along the way as they approached a safe meeting point. The stranger slowed slightly, giving the child space to notice their surroundings. There was a sense of normalcy now, a rhythm that allowed the child to breathe fully, to take in the world without fear. The stranger spoke softly, guiding the child gently through the process of preparing to meet a caregiver. "You've done really well today," they said. "You stayed calm and made the right choices. Soon, you'll be with someone who can take care of you every day." The words brought a mixture of relief and curiosity to the child, who nodded quietly, still processing the depth of what had happened. The child's small steps were careful as they followed the stranger, but there was a growing energy in their movement, a sense of readiness and confidence. The stranger occasionally glanced down, offering quiet smiles and gentle words of encouragement. Each small gesture reinforced the idea that the child's courage and patience were valued, and that their feelings mattered. The trust that had formed earlier in the day had solidified into a bond that was both comforting and empowering. A few moments later, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the street. The person who would ensure the child's continued safety. The child's eyes widened with recognition and relief. The stranger introduced them briefly, ensuring a smooth transition, and spoke to the child in a calm, reassuring tone. "You're going to be safe now," they said. The child nodded, still holding the stranger's hand, unsure if letting go was the right choice. The stranger gave a gentle squeeze, reinforcing the idea that it was okay to trust the next step. Once the child was safely in the presence of their caregiver, the stranger stepped back slightly, allowing space while remaining nearby. The child's small face lit up with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering curiosity about the person who had appeared at the perfect moment earlier. The caregiver thanked the stranger, and the child waved shyly. Still holding on to the reassurance that had been built over the hours, it was a moment filled with human warmth and quiet emotion. A resolution that carried the weight of both relief and hope. After ensuring that the child was fully comfortable and safe, the stranger finally stepped away, blending into the background once again. The child watched for a moment, a sense of longing mixed with gratitude filling their chest. The afternoon had been a journey from fear to trust, from panic to security. And the stranger had been the constant presence guiding them through each step. The child understood, even without words, that this encounter had changed something profound within them. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the afternoon remained vivid in the child's mind. The fear of that moment lingered briefly, but it was always accompanied by the stronger memory of protection and care. The child thought about the stranger often, imagining the calm, steady presence that had transformed their fear into confidence. It was a realization that one person's courage and kindness could ripple far beyond a single moment. Influencing a young life in lasting ways, the child returned to school, playgrounds, and daily routines. But something had shifted. There was a new awareness of self and surroundings. A growing confidence that came from the knowledge that they had survived fear with the help of someone who truly cared. The child began to notice details they had never appreciated before. The kindness of strangers, the warmth of friends, the beauty in small, everyday moments. Each observation was colored by the memory of the stranger's protection and guidance. Over time, strangers' actions revealed themselves to have more impact than the child had initially understood. Unbeknownst to the child, the stranger had quietly ensured resources that would support the child's education and well-being. A scholarship for school, support for extracurricular activities, and small but significant acts of assistance were provided without the child knowing who was behind them. The child's life began to change in subtle but profound ways, creating opportunities that would have been otherwise unattainable. The child noticed improvements in their daily life: more books to read, safer routes to school, a growing circle of friends who shared interests and values. Each advancement, though seemingly ordinary, was a direct result of the stranger's quiet intervention. The child, unaware of the full extent, felt an increasing sense of possibility and confidence. The memory of the afternoon attack remained, but it no longer carried the same fear. It had been transformed into a lesson in resilience and trust. Years passed, and the child grew into adolescence with a remarkable combination of courage, empathy, and awareness. The lessons learned from that afternoon: the value of trust, the importance of guidance, the impact of human kindness, remained central to their character. The child learned to navigate challenges with a calm and deliberate approach, often reflecting on the stranger who had intervened at a critical moment. The memory of being held, guided, and reassured became a source of strength, a reminder of how much difference a single caring individual could make. The child eventually discovered, in pieces and over time, who the stranger truly was. The revelation was astonishing. A person of significant influence and resources had taken a personal interest in ensuring their safety and success. The child's gratitude was immense, yet it was paired with a deep understanding of the human choice to act with courage and kindness without seeking recognition. The stranger's actions had been entirely selfless, motivated by empathy and the instinct to protect and guide. This knowledge transformed the child's perspective on the world. They realized that courage and care could come from anyone, regardless of status or circumstance. The lessons from that single afternoon influenced every decision, every act of kindness, and every approach to helping others. The child, now grown and thriving, carried forward the principles of empathy, patience, and protection. Applying them in small ways to the lives around them, the child often reflected on the significance of that encounter. A moment of fear had led to a life-altering connection, a story of trust and human care that continued to shape their world. The stranger's intervention had not only provided immediate safety, but it also created a foundation for a future filled with opportunity, confidence, and resilience. The child's journey from panic to security, from vulnerability to empowerment, was a testament to the enduring impact of a single, deliberate act of kindness. Even as the years continued, the child, now older, often felt the quiet presence of that afternoon in their heart. Whenever fear arose, whenever uncertainty threatened, the memory of the stranger's calm, steady guidance reminded them that courage and care could transform the most frightening moments into lessons of trust and growth. It was a profound realization that life could be unpredictable. Yet the presence of one person willing to act with empathy could change everything. The child's story, shaped by that afternoon, became an example to others. A narrative of hope, resilience, and human connection. Teachers, friends, and mentors observed the child's calm, thoughtful, and compassionate demeanor, noticing how experiences had fostered strength and understanding. The child, once small and frightened, had grown into a person capable of facing the world with courage and empathy, guided by the memory of one extraordinary human act. Looking back, the child understood that the stranger's intervention had been more than a simple act of protection. It had been a turning point, a quiet but powerful moment that shifted the trajectory of their life. The child's growth, achievements, and resilience were all connected to that singular moment when fear had met courage. Panic had met calm, and vulnerability had met human empathy. It was a story that could inspire, teach, and remind others of the extraordinary power of simple, deliberate kindness. And so, the child's life continued, shaped and transformed by an afternoon that began in fear and ended in hope. The stranger's presence remained a quiet, guiding force, a memory of trust and care that carried the child through challenges, successes, and every step in between. It was an ending that was also a beginning, a life rewritten by compassion, courage, and the unbelievable impact of one person who chose to act with humanity in a moment of crisis.